Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, LawVu's community for in-house legal professionals. LawVu's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawVu's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house legal leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Lancelot, the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawVu, and I have the great honor to have with me here today Robyn Diaz, who is the EVP and CLO of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Robyn, where are you coming to us from today?
David, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm coming to you from Memphis, Tennessee.
Beautiful Memphis, Tennessee. Really great to have you on the show, Robyn. I first saw you speaking at a Consero healthcare GC conference. Feels like almost a year ago now, but I don't think it was that long ago. But
it was October.
October, there you go. Wow. So back in October, up on stage, and I was so impressed by how you were speaking about, being the legal leader of the institution that you work at, which is world renowned, and we'll hear more about in a second. But the way you talked about it from such a modern perspective, I just thought for anybody who doesn't work in the healthcare space, and for many who do, it would be great to get some of your insights for our audience. So welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Great,
So,
happy to be here.
I think we should probably start this is a global audience, and sort of spans the gamut from very seasoned professionals to people who are just getting into the in-house practice sort of field. Maybe give us some background on St. Jude and its history and what it does today.
Sure. So St. Jude's mission is to advance cures and means of prevention for pediatric catastrophic diseases through research and treatment. So we are a specialized teaching hospital and a degree granting institution based in Memphis, Tennessee. We opened our doors in 1962. We have affiliate sites at 8 other locations throughout the South and the Midwest of the United States, which contain St. Jude co-branded pediatric hematology oncology clinics. We also have a biotherapeutics manufacturing facility on campus, and as I mentioned, a small degree granting institution focused on graduate degrees in the biomedical sciences. And we have a global program focused on increasing cure rates in low and middle income countries through knowledge sharing and capacity building. And I've been here for about 16 years, and I oversee legal affairs, compliance, internal audit, research integrity, and government affairs.
Gotcha. So covering a couple of things there.
Yes.
I'm not sure why, but I don't think I had realized you also grant degrees.
Yes, we have a graduate school. It's called the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital Graduate School of Biomedical Sciences.
Wow.
It's a mouthful. But they grant a PhD in biomedical sciences, as well as several master's degrees.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's sort of like a higher ed institution that's part of a world-renowned medical facility, I guess you'd call it, but also with, do you say biomedical manufacturing?
Biotherapeutics manufacturing, yes.
Biotherapeutics. Wow.
So
Okay.
focused on pediatrics and initially for use in clinical trials on the St. Jude campus. So,
Right.
There's not necessarily a return on investment for industry for every single therapeutic out there, but there might be therapeutics that are useful in the clinical trial setting. So that has been open since about 2003.
Wow. Okay. And then I think I don't know if you'd say it this way, but the sort of primary purpose of the institution is to treat children who are suffering from cancer.
From cancer and other pediatric catastrophic diseases. So
Okay.
also certain blood disorders like sickle cell disease.
Right.
We have infectious diseases physicians. We do quite a bit of work in the neurological disorders area as well now.
Oh,
And really, the focus is on treatment, research, and knowledge generation.
okay.
So I think of it more as it has a feel of a university setting. So
Sure.
there's everything from the hospital, which you might think of as an academic medical center environment, a university environment where we have scientists doing bench research, and then we have the degree granting institution.
Right. Yeah. No, I have to say, I've kind of gotten that sense. I work with a lot of higher ed GCs, and this certainly feels like something that has that like incredibly broad scope.
Yes.
When you speak to higher ed GCs, it's always sort of like you also have an airport and a police department and a nuclear power plant. And from someone like me who comes from, advertising on the internet, basically, it's always really quite amazing that you guys are able to deal with that incredible portfolio. And then maybe, I don't know if this is the right thing to call it, Robyn, but the business model, the way that you're able to treat all of these children, how does that work?
Yes. So the hospital was founded by the entertainer Danny Thomas. And his original vision was no child shall die in the dawn of life, but also that this facility should be available for patients without any charge to them or their families. And so we do bill insurance if a patient family has insurance, but we do not ever pass along the cost sharing obligations to those patients or patient families. And we have a fundraising organization that collects the donations that allow us to operate.
Yeah. Yeah. So certainly a purpose-led institution.
Absolutely.
Certainly a purpose-led institution. Thanks for that, Robyn. So the legal function for that institution, can you give us a sense for how that's organized?
Sure. So there's about 25 people in the legal department, 17 lawyers, and the rest are other professionals. The lawyers are organized into practice groups because of the breadth of the work that we are doing. And so we have everything from education law to health affairs to international and foreign affairs, employment law, disputes. Almost everything, you name it, we have it, other than the things that you would only see in for-profit industry. So of course we're not regulated by the SEC. We don't have those obligations, but pretty much anything that would come up in the nonprofit world, we face and have to deal with. And so we have lawyers assigned to those practice groups. An individual lawyer might be assigned to several practice groups, just depending on their focus. The team is led by me as CLO with 2 deputy general counsel. And then, as I said, we have a number of other professionals. So we do have a legal ops team. And I think we were one of the first in the U.S. healthcare industry to really focus on legal operations, making that as efficient as possible, collecting data, all of those pieces. We have some people dedicated to governance, to clinical risk, and to third-party risk.
So, I mean, I have to imagine it's an incredibly interesting place to work.
Absolutely. This is true of a lot of GCs, I would say. But certainly given the scope of the issues that we deal with, I really never know on Monday what my week is going to look like.
Absolutely. I mean, even me, from my limited background, let's say, that's got to be one of the best parts of the job, right? It's sort of it can be a little infuriating sometimes when the thing that comes up isn't super fun, but always unique and interesting issues arising, and certainly with the scope of St. Jude, it must be just extraordinary. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting for everybody from from this audience's perspective. So I'm really interested, Robyn, and I'm sure other people are too, how you got to where you are today, right? To be at an institution like that, leading in the capacity that you are. How did you get into legal practice in the first place?
So I really think I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I enjoyed research and writing. I enjoyed analysis. I enjoyed debating. Never necessarily thought I wanted to be a litigator. So it's interesting because a lot of young people can't envision anything in the law other than litigation, because of course that's what they see on television.
Yep.
And I always knew that wasn't exactly the right fit for me, but I knew I liked everything else about the idea of being a lawyer. Had a family friend who had a solo legal practice, and so he allowed me to intern for him the summer after my freshman year of college, and so I got some exposure to that environment. Again, he was a litigator, so I reaffirmed that was not necessarily the path for me, but still an important experience for me. Knew when I graduated from college that I wanted to work for a few years before I went to law school. And I ended up working, I went to college in Boston, then moved to Washington, D.C., and I ended up working for a healthcare consulting and best practices company, then known as the Healthcare Advisory Board, now known as the Advisory Board Company. It's a publicly traded company now. It was not at the time. It was privately held. And I did healthcare best practices research. So essentially someone from one of our client hospitals would call and say, we want to set up a comprehensive breast cancer treatment center. Tell us how to do it. And I would look for the best examples in various settings, a rural setting, an urban setting, suburban, different size facilities, reach out and interview them and come up with a report on that. And then I moved up through the ranks there and was the client contact for a number of hospitals, including some national systems. And so got really good exposure to the variety of issues that come up in health law, right? I was dealing with medical staff affairs one day and reimbursement from the VA system the next, and it was all over the spectrum. And after a few years of that, I thought, okay, it's time to go to law school now because I feel like I am answering quasi-legal questions. And now I know I'm really interested in health law. I knew it was the law, but I didn't have a real direction until then. And so I went to Georgetown Law. And when I graduated, I was with the law firm Kroll and Mooring in Washington, D.C., and initially split between two of their regulatory practice groups, environmental and health law, and enjoyed both. But again, I knew I wanted to go down that health law path, and so focused there. And I felt pretty early on in my legal career that I wanted to go in-house. I knew I wasn't particularly interested in generating business. It just didn't feel comfortable to me. It was not something that I ever thought I would really enjoy doing. And so a few years in, I had an experience to move in-house, and I went in-house with MedStar Health, which is a 10-hospital system between the DC and Baltimore regions, has about 26,000 employees. And that was great experience for me because, of course, when you work for a law firm as an associate, just about everything that you do is overseen by counsel or a partner, and you're never really out there on your own. And when you go in-house in the hospital world, you are out there on your own pretty quickly, right? Most hospital systems, legal departments are not staffed in a way to provide the level of supervision that a law firm does. And so I was very quickly handling physician agreements all on my own. And I was added to the call schedule, which is a 24/7 schedule for a week at a time, getting questions in the middle of the night about, let's say a mom who was in labor and did not want to agree to a C-section, but the obstetrician thought that that was necessary for the safety of the mom and the baby. What do we
Mm.
do? All of those types of questions that arise and really force you to learn quickly and on the job and keep you on your toes.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, just emphasizing the difference between working in healthcare law and some other areas of practice where we used to have a joke, Robyn, you might not find this funny, but we would often say, I mean, in tech land, we're not saving lives here.
Well, and we're
Actually,
not saving lives, but we do take pride in the fact that we are facilitating that on behalf
yes.
of our clinicians, right? We are trying to remove the obstacles that allow them to do what they do and do it well. And so I did that for a number of years, and then I became a mother and was looking for a little bit of a different setting than the DC area. I was spending a lot of time in traffic and not particularly enjoying that. And so my husband and I started looking at other parts of the country to move to, and saw this job opening in Memphis, which was actually a lateral move at the time. I was really going from associate general counsel to associate general counsel. The legal department at St. Jude at the time was small. So I was joining to be the third lawyer, one of three lawyers, which to me sounded amazing at the time, because to have three lawyers for one hospital, as opposed to having, one lawyer who covered two hospitals plus three other subsidiaries, which is what I was experiencing in my prior role, sounded like it was going to be a great balance for me. And so we moved to Memphis, having no connections in Memphis whatsoever, no family here. I had only been during the interview process, had never even been to Memphis before. So we moved with our 18-month-old. And St. Jude is an amazing facility. As I said, it's really a campus, sort of a university campus feel. We quickly made a lot of friends here in Memphis, kind of built up our community here. And I was able to grow in the legal department and then fairly quickly grow the legal department, because I was promoted to deputy general counsel about 18 months in. And then another 18 months after that, my predecessor who hired me left the organization. And I applied for and became the chief legal officer. And that was around the same time as we had a CEO transition. So we had a new CEO come on board who has since had two very ambitious strategic plans. And so I've had the privilege of growing the department to align with those ambitious strategic plans. So in my time here, we opened the graduate school. It did not exist before I was chief legal officer here. We really ramped up our global work and developed the Department of Global Pediatric Medicine and the Global Alliance, which is an alliance of hundreds of organizations around the world, really with a focus on facilities in low and middle income countries, with St. Jude aiming to help increase cure rates for pediatric cancer and other pediatric catastrophic diseases in those countries by sharing information with them, helping them develop clinical trials that are at a caliber that doesn't require them to necessarily send patients to the West so that they can treat their patients in their countries. And I think all of that is part of what's kept me here for so long. It's really been a pretty long tenure for a CLO, but it's been such a growth experience for me, because I started out as a health lawyer and I still consider myself a health lawyer, but I've had to learn higher ed law, and I've had to operate in this global environment and focus on individual national laws and, the employment consequences and its permanent establishment issues. So it's kept it very interesting.
Yeah, you're giving me flashback on the permanent establishment situation. And certainly have enjoyed those issues myself, Robyn. So clearly the organization was growing and expanding and needed a legal function that to grow with it. But where do you think you got your model for a modern legal function from? Like as you were saying, in healthcare at the time, that just wasn't really a thing.
Right.
So where were you seeing that, and how were you able to, take that and communicate it to your institutional leadership?
Some of it was just paying attention to what was happening in the legal industry. So going to Association of Corporate Counsel meetings, and listening there and meeting counterparts at other organizations. And actually, Consero, where you met me, they started their healthcare GC program just a couple of years into my term as CLO here. And so I was part of the kind of the founding of that group. And that was wonderful because it was an early opportunity to get those leaders in a room together and talk about and share best practices. What are you doing? What can we learn from one another? What do we see happening in other industries that maybe we're not doing in healthcare? And to be fair, I think the reason that some of these things weren't happening in healthcare was because hospital in-house departments in general tend not to be that robustly staffed. And so there's just not the time to put into it. And then we do have a lot of these urgent situations that come up around patient care that maybe take us into a different course than a more traditional business environment. But experiences like that at Consero were really, I think, important for me in terms of growing my network. Another important group for me has actually been the Children's Hospital Association has a chief lawyers group.
Okay.
And we take turns twice a year hosting each other at our facilities. And another great, very sophisticated group that shares ideas, talks about, well, what are you doing? How did you get there? So yeah, all of that. And then I knew I had to grow the department. I knew that I could not help the institution achieve its strategic objectives with the 3 lawyers that we initially had. And so some of that was just about gathering data, right? Showing the numbers in order to support the need for growth. And that is what eventually led to legal operations and advancing that further.
Yes. Yeah. No, it really reminds me of the sort of journey that higher ed is also on, I think, particularly in the United States. I think outside the US, it's even more challenging for some of those institutions to get the support they need. But in the United States, you have sort of a whole spectrum of even in some cases external counsel acting as general counsel still.
Yes.
All the way to sophisticated departments such as yours, but sort of like an analogous to yours in higher ed. And I think the same thing has been happening to healthcare over the past, say, 10 years, where you have sort of the traditional model still exists and is pretty widespread, but then you have some cutting edge teams at the more, I don't know what you call them, sophisticated institutions, perhaps, where people like you are talking to people like me about data, which of course I love talking about, but we're not going to spend the whole time talking about data. We're here to talk about St. Jude's and your legal function, but it is really fascinating to me to see that evolution happening, and to see, how the sort of role models are built, the role models and the frameworks.
Yes. And I'll say, I think I probably had a little bit of an advantage here in that we are a data-driven organization. It's an organization run by scientists. They like data. They like to analyze and question data. And so it wasn't as if I was presenting that to an audience that didn't welcome it.
Great. Yeah. I always call that speaking the language of the business, but I'm not sure if that works in the charitable hospital context. But
it does. I think it does. Yes.
Okay. Well, so I know that you have, many exciting challenges, I'll call them challenges when you're working in this kind of environment. And one of them is certainly the geopolitical context that we're all operating in at the moment. And I
Yes.
was just wondering if and how you are dealing with that at the moment.
Yes, so I definitely am. And I'll say it can be as routine as a business leader, perhaps not understanding the extent to which legal considerations will come into play for something they're proposing. So, they have an employee who is a foreign national. That employee has a family need to go back to their home country and they want to work from there for 6 to 9 months. And the supervisor thinks not a problem for me. They can get their work done from there. Hopefully they come to us with that. If not, we hear about it at some point. And of course, there are potential legal consequences of that, employment, benefits, payroll, potential permanent establishment. So it can be fairly routine things like that, or contracting with foreign entities. And if we're paying for services, making sure that that's done compliantly, and that we're getting the documentation that we need. But more recently, we've had some different challenges, and I can give you an example. We have a small administrative office in Dubai.
Yeah.
And before opening that office, we of course engaged in a risk assessment and looked at country-specific risks, safety, compliance, all of those elements. We never imagined, though, that the war exposure would be what it now is in that country. And so one thing that we, and I think a lot of companies have learned from this is, while you can't predict which geopolitical events will occur, scenario planning is incredibly important. Looking at early warning indicators for what might happen, even if you think it's unlikely that it might happen, is important. And planning for scenarios such as, if we have to evacuate our employees, do we have first and second choice jurisdictions for them?
Yeah.
Because what we learned about our employees who were in Dubai is that they all wanted to go to different places. They all had different preferences. And so then you have to ask yourself, as a business entity, are you willing to take on that risk? And are you even willing to, put in the legal dollars and legal resources into figuring out what the consequences of that would be in multiple jurisdictions? Or are you going to say, we respect that and appreciate it, but we can evacuate you to here or to here, and fully prepared to support you in that, but those are your choices. So I think that's something that probably a lot of countries or companies are dealing with, but not necessarily something we envisioned with respect to a place like UAE.
Yeah. There are plenty of organizations like, say, the oil and gas industry who have been confronting those sort of challenges in very unstable environments for quite a long time. And to them, it's sort of background noise almost, oh, we had to pull the team out, or we based them somewhere, that was a little bit more hardened. But I think now with, the unpredictability of events, let's say, it becomes almost inherent in your planning to put that sort of risk profiling in place. And the most important thing for business really in the end is stability and the rule of law. And I think we find ourselves in an extremely challenging environment, whether you're trying to help sick children or just run whatever business you're trying to run.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I can imagine that's an extremely challenging environment. Any thoughts about the future for the in-house sort of legal profession, particularly in regards to healthcare and where things are going?
Sure. I think it's a field that will never be boring. It's a heavily regulated field. And the regulatory environment changes with each administration. Plus, you have the federal and state levels of regulation, right? So
Yep.
Medicare, Medicaid, those payment schemes are a big part of the healthcare industry. And those are largely regulated at the federal level, but insurance is regulated at the state level. Licensure is at the state level. And so absolutely having to deal with both. And if you're a multi-jurisdiction employer, you obviously need to worry about that in many places. And I do think there is an increasingly global perspective to healthcare that we need to, if we're really looking at cures, we need to make sure that we're looking at a large enough population to find out what the underlying challenges are, and that we shouldn't just be seeking to improve care in our local community. If we have the resources, we should be looking at improving care on a broader scope.
Oh, what a cool institution. Robyn, I've really appreciated the time you've carved out for us here. The purpose at St. Jude is obviously keeping you and the team super engaged, and I think it's just wonderful. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you, David.
See you again soon. And thank you, everybody out there. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Legal Leaders Podcast.